MTV in the 90s was awesome, and if you grew up in that era, you know about Liquid Television. From 1991 to 1995, MTV aired an absolute game changer of a show that would launch some of the most iconic characters in animation history. It was weird, it was experimental, and it was completely unlike anything else on television. So what exactly was Liquid Television? Imagine if you put your favorite TV shows in a blender and hit puree. That's the pitch MTV's creative director, Japhet Asher, came up with. Each 30-minute episode was a wild, rapid-fire collection of different animated shorts. Some were only a minute long, others went on for 5. You never knew what was coming next. And that was the whole point. This was MTV changing the game again. The underground, the weird, the stuff that mainstream television was too afraid to touch. Liquid Television featured animated shorts from independent artists, underground comics, film festivals, and experimental animators. Some segments were hand-drawn, some were computer-generated CGI, which was cutting-edge stuff for that time. Some were puppets, stop motion, live action, or combinations of all three. Before YouTube, before social media, before the internet democratized content creation, Liquid Television was doing something revolutionary. It gave independent animators a platform. The show was heavily influenced by Spike and Mike's Festival of Animation, which started in 1990. This was an underground animation festival that traveled around the country, bringing weird, rebellious animation to audiences who wouldn't otherwise see it. MTV literally started airing some of the same shorts from that festival on Liquid Television, which meant the show became a vehicle for discovery. Think about it from an animator's perspective in the early 90s. You couldn't just upload your work to YouTube or TikTok. You couldn't build a following on social media. You were either working in the Hollywood system, or you were making underground comics and experimental art that almost nobody would ever see. Then Liquid Television came along and said, "We don't care if you're mainstream. If your idea is interesting, we'll air it to millions of MTV viewers." Animators were drawing inspiration from underground comics too. Many of the segments on Liquid Television were adapted from something called Raw, a compilation of comic work by underground cartoonists like Richard Sala, Peter Bagger, and Charles Burns. Dog Boy, one of the show's most memorable recurring segments, came straight from Charles Burns' Raw comics. And here's the beautiful part. Because these independent animators were getting national exposure, many of them went on to work on major animated series. If you loved animation in the 2000s and beyond, you probably have Liquid Television to thank for introducing you to the talent behind it. Now, let's talk about the segments that stood out, my personal favorites. The Specialist was a recurring serialized action segment that became a fan favorite. It had that spy thriller vibe with smart writing and memorable characters. You could actually follow a story, which was different from a lot of the one-off weirdness on the show. Dog Boy, based on Charles Burns' underground comics, was pure stylized weirdness. It had this live-action plastique look, kind of creepy, kind of cool. Every time Dog Boy came on, you knew you were about to see something bizarre and experimental. The animation was distinctly different from everything else on the show, and that was the whole appeal. Aeon Flux started as a recurring segment on Liquid Television, a visually stunning, dialogue-free action series about a morally ambiguous female assassin operating in a dystopian world. Created by Peter Chung, Aeon Flux was absolutely revolutionary. The character design was unlike anything mainstream TV had ever seen. Long limbs, angular features, a completely original visual style. Everything you learned about the story, the characters, the world, it all came through the visuals. That was bold, that was experimental, that was exactly what Liquid Television was all about. The success of these segments was so massive that MTV greenlit a full Aeon Flux series, and the character became so iconic that in 2005 she got a live-action film with Charlize Theron. Winter Steel was a character-driven dramatic segment that showed the range of what Liquid Television could do. This wasn't comedy or action. This was character development and emotional storytelling in a surreal package. And here's something that didn't get enough credit at the time. Winter Steel was a strong female lead, and she was created during an era when men dominated cartoon protagonist roles. The same was true of Aeon Flux and other LT gems. Liquid Television was genuinely diverse and inclusive, even if it wasn't always deliberate. The show just created a space where any voice could belong. A fun, serialized comedy segment that had a completely different tone from everything else on the show. Bobby and Billy brought that sitcom energy to Liquid Television, proving the show could work in almost any genre. You remember this one if you watched the show, The Art School Girls of Doom. These segments had titles like Drummer, Beach, The Bra, and they were absolutely perfect examples of what made Liquid Television special. They didn't follow traditional narrative structure. They were abstract, funny, and weird in all the right ways. And now we get to the heavyweight champion of Liquid Television's legacy, Beavis and Butthead. This is the story of how one man named Mike Judge created one of the most iconic duos in animation history, and it all started on Liquid Television. Mike Judge was a young animator in the early 90s, and he created a series of shorts for the show. One of them was called Office Space, a satirical take on corporate culture. Another was called The Honky Problem, but the one that changed everything? Beavis and Butthead. The concept was delightfully stupid, and Liquid Television introduced the masses to these two, airing Frog Baseball and Peace, Love and Understanding. The segment was so popular that MTV immediately greenlit a full Beavis and Butthead series, which aired from 1993 onward. That show became absolutely massive. Parents hated it. Teachers complained about it. Kids loved it. It defined a generation's sense of humor. One of the most beloved segments was the two teenage delinquents sitting on a couch making fun of music videos. Beavis and Butthead got two feature films, one in 1996 and another in 2022. Mike Judge went on to create King of the Hill, one of the most successful animated series ever. All of it traces back to those early Beavis and Butthead shorts on Liquid Television. Brad Dahmer was pure surrealism. Psychedelic detective segments in season 3 brought that trippy, experimental vibe that defined some of Liquid TV's weirdest moments. These weren't meant to make traditional sense. They were meant to challenge your perception of what animation could do. A skateboard-themed character with segments like Hill Bomb Skate Sniper and Let's Go to the Stinkin' Movies. It proved that Liquid Television could work with different subcultures and niche interests. So why do we remember Liquid Television more than 30 years later? Why do people still talk about it? Because it was revolutionary. Before Liquid Television, if you wanted to see experimental avant-garde animation, you went to film festivals or underground comic shops. MTV brought all of that directly into millions of homes every week. The creators and animators on Liquid Television went on to work on The Simpsons, King of the Hill, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and countless other shows. This one series basically populated the animation industry with fresh talent. It was awesome because it took chances. It believed in artists. It gave platforms to people who didn't fit the mainstream mold. It was punk rock animation. It was underground comics on television. It was experimental art on a major network. If you lived through the 90s and caught a few episodes of Liquid Television, you were witnessing something special. And if you didn't, go find them now and subscribe to Macabre Media TV for more weird nostalgia that is being added all the time.